Commander Yuna stared at the flashing red lights covering her control panel and felt her stomach drop. Her beautiful Vortanian battlecruiser, the pride of the Galactic Fleet, was dying around her. The quantum core that powered her ship was shutting down piece by piece, and she could hear the awful grinding sounds coming from the engine room. This wasn't supposed to happen. Vartanian ships were built to last for centuries without major problems. Their technology was so advanced that most species in the galaxy couldn't even understand how it worked. But here she was, floating in the middle of nowhere with a ship that refused to move. The nearest star system showed up on her emergency scanner. Haven Station, it was called. A human outpost. Yuna's heart sank even further. Humans were barely past throwing rocks at each other as far as most galactic citizens were concerned. They had only discovered faster-than-light travel a few decades ago, and their technology was laughably primitive compared to what the advanced civilizations used. But she had no choice. Her backup power was failing, and if she didn't get help, soon she would be stuck drifting through space until her life support gave out. With trembling fingers, she sent out a distress call toward the human station. The response came back faster than she expected. A scratchy voice speaking broken galactic. Standard crackled through her communication system. "This is salvage ship Lucky Break. We got your call. Someone needs help out there." "Yes," Yuna replied, trying to keep the desperation out of her voice. "My ship has suffered a critical failure. Can you assist?" "Sure thing. We'll be right there." Within a few hours, Yuna saw the most beat-up spacecraft she had ever encountered slowly approaching her vessel. It looked like someone had welded together pieces from a dozen different ships, painted it with whatever color they had lying around, and then forgotten to clean it for several years. Burn marks and dents covered its hull, and she could see jury-rigged patches holding some sections together. The airlock connected with a loud clang that made Yuna wince. A moment later, a human male floated through wearing coveralls that were stained with so many different substances that she couldn't identify half of them. His toolkit looked like something from a museum, full of simple mechanical tools that any advanced civilization had stopped using centuries ago. "Hi there," the human said with a friendly smile. "I'm Juan. Your fancy ship needs fixing." Yuna looked at this creature and felt a mix of embarrassment and worry. Juan was shorter than most species she knew, with rough hands that showed he worked with them every day. His dark hair was messy, and his clothes were clearly designed for getting dirty rather than looking professional. Everything about him screamed primitive technology and crude methods. "I should warn you," Yuna said carefully, "this is a Vortanian vessel. Our technology is quite advanced. I'm not sure if you'll be able to help." Juan shrugged and pulled out what looked like an ancient scanner. "Well, let's take a look and see what we're dealing with." Yuna led him to the engine room, explaining, along the way, how the quantum core worked and what systems had failed. She noticed that Juan nodded at the right places and asked surprisingly good questions, even though his grammar was terrible and he mispronounced half the technical terms. When they reached the engine room, Yuna watched in horror as Juan immediately started touching things. In Vortanian culture, their technology was treated with religious reverence. Trained engineers spent years learning the proper procedures for even basic maintenance. But this human was running his hands over crystalline matrices and exotic metal, conduits like he was petting a friendly animal. "Don't touch that," Yuna said quickly. "Those components require specialized handling procedures. The resonance frequencies alone could—" "Relax," Juan said, not stopping his examination. "I can feel what's wrong. Your quantum flow is all backed up right here, and this regulator thing is stuck tighter than a rusty bolt." Yuna stared at him. "Feel what was wrong? That wasn't how advanced engineering worked. You used instruments and calculations and careful analysis. You didn't just touch things and guess." But as she watched, something strange began to happen. Juan's movements became more confident as he explored her ship's systems. His primitive tools somehow managed to interface with technology that should have required specialized Vortanian equipment. He pulled out cables and connectors that looked like they came from a scrapyard, but they fit perfectly into ports, designed for precision instruments. "This might look weird," Juan said, starting to wrap some kind of silver tape around a critical junction. "But trust me, I've seen this problem before. Different ships, same basic issue. Yuna wanted to stop him. Every instinct told her that letting this primitive creature modify her advanced ship was insane. But she was trapped, and her alternatives were limited to slowly dying in space or taking this crazy chance. Juan worked for several hours, humming tunelessly while he connected human components to Vortanian systems using methods that made Yuna's engineering training scream in protest. He used actual tape to hold things together. Tape on a starship that cost more than most planets' annual budgets. Finally, he stepped back and wiped his hands on his already filthy coveralls. Okay, try starting her up now. Yuna hesitated, then activated her engines. She expected sparks, explosions, or complete system failure. Instead, her ship's engines hummed to life with more power and smoothness than she had ever experienced. The quantum core stabilized at efficiency levels that were theoretically impossible, according to Vortanian engineering principles. Her ship wasn't just fixed. It was better than it had ever been. 3 months after Juan fixed her ship, Yuna was starting to worry that people might think she was cheating. During routine patrol exercises with the Vortanian fleet, her cruiser was leaving every other ship in the dust. Not by a little bit either. She was outrunning vessels that were supposed to be faster, outmaneuvering ships with better turning capabilities, and using less fuel while doing it all. The other commanders were starting to ask uncomfortable questions. During the last fleet meeting, Captain Do-Yun had pulled her aside and asked if she had gotten some kind of secret military upgrade. When she tried to explain that a human mechanic had simply fixed her broken systems, he laughed and walked away, clearly thinking she was lying. But the numbers didn't lie. Her ship's efficiency ratings had jumped by over 250% compared to standard Vortanian specifications. The quantum core that Juan had jury-rigged with tape and salvaged parts was running smoother than factory-new systems. Her weapon charging times had improved, her shields recharged faster, and her engines could maintain maximum speed for hours longer than they should have been able to. The real problem started when her ship went in for its routine annual inspection. Every galactic vessel had to be checked once a year to make sure it met safety standards and wasn't carrying illegal modifications. Yuna had completely forgotten about the inspection until the notice appeared on her communication system. She tried not to look nervous as the inspection team boarded her ship. These were serious people from the Galactic Engineering Consortium, the organization that set technology standards for the entire known galaxy. They carried advanced scanning equipment and had the authority to ground any vessel that didn't meet their strict requirements. The lead inspector, a tall alien with blue skin and way too many eyes, started running his scanners over her ship's systems. Within minutes, his expression changed from bored routine to shocked confusion. He ran the scans again, then called over his colleagues to double-check the readings. "Commander Yuna," he said in a voice that suggested she was in serious trouble, "these performance metrics are impossible. No Vortanian vessel can achieve these efficiency levels. What modifications have been made to this ship?" Yuna swallowed hard. "A human mechanic repaired some damage to my quantum core about 3 months ago." The inspector's multiple eyes blinked in what she assumed was disbelief. "A human? You allowed a primitive species to modify advanced Vortanian technology?" "He just fixed what was broken," Yuna said defensively. "I was stranded and had no choice." The inspection team spent the next 6 hours crawling through every inch of her ship, documenting every change Juan had made. They found his jury-rigged connections, his improvised components, and his liberal use of what appeared to be standard Earth duct tape holding together systems worth more than most planets' gross domestic product. Word of the impossible readings spread quickly through official channels. Within a week, senior engineer Taman of the consortium arrived at Haven Station with a full investigation team. Taman was a legend in engineering circles, someone who had spent centuries perfecting galactic technology standards. If anyone could figure out what had happened to Yuna's ship, it would be him. Yuna watched nervously as the investigation team's sleek transport ship docked with Haven Station. These weren't just inspectors. These were the galaxy's top experts, and they looked extremely unhappy about having to travel to what they clearly considered a backwater human outpost. Taman was exactly what Yuna had expected from the stories. She'd heard about him. Tall, dignified, wearing robes that probably cost more than most people made in a year. He spoke in precise, clipped sentences and carried himself like someone who was used to being the smartest person in any room. "Where is this human who allegedly modified your vessel?" Taemin asked, making it clear he thought the whole situation was ridiculous. They found Juan exactly where Yuna had left him 3 months ago, working on another broken ship in his cluttered garage. He was covered in even more grease and oil than before, singing some human song off-key, while he welded something that definitely shouldn't have been welded. Taemin looked around the garage with obvious disgust. Tools were scattered everywhere. Parts from dozens of different alien technologies were mixed together in bins, and everything was covered in a layer of grime that suggested cleaning wasn't a high priority. "You are the individual who modified the commander's vessel?" Taemin asked, his voice dripping with skepticism. Juan looked up from his welding, pushed his safety goggles up onto his forehead, and grinned. "Oh, hey, you must be here about Yuna's ship. How's she running?" "That is precisely what we intend to determine," Taemin said coldly. "Our analysis indicates that you somehow bypassed the quantum flux regulator, rerouted the primary power coupling through an unauthorized pathway, and created a hybrid system that violates fundamental principles of energy conservation." Juan nodded. A long like this made perfect sense to him. "Yeah, that sounds about right. How did you know to bypass the quantum flux regulator?" Taemin demanded, clearly expecting some kind of technical explanation. Juan shrugged and went back to his welding. "Looked stuck, so I unstuck it." The silence that followed was deafening. Taemin stared at Juan like he had just claimed to have invented gravity. The other investigators looked at each other with expressions that suggested they were witnessing something that challenged their understanding of the universe. "Looked stuck?" Taemin repeated slowly. "You bypassed one of the most sophisticated control systems in galactic engineering because it looked stuck." "Well, yeah," Juan said, pausing his work again. "I mean, the energy flow was all backed up, right? Like when your drain gets clogged and water won't go down. Sometimes you just need to find another way around the blockage." Taemin opened his mouth, then closed it again. In all his centuries of engineering experience, no one had ever compared quantum flux regulation to a clogged drain. But as he thought about it, he realized that Juan's crude analogy actually described the problem better than most technical manuals. The news started small, like most galaxy-changing events do. A routine inspection report showing impossible performance. Numbers. A few engineers sharing data over secure channels, but within days the story was spreading through every major communication network in known space. A human mechanic had made a Vortanian ship perform better than it was supposed to. Not just a little better. Dramatically, impossibly better. In the crystal towers of the Vortanian homeworld, emergency meetings were being called at all hours. The Vortanians had built their entire reputation on being the galaxy's master engineers. Their ships were considered the gold standard, their designs copied by dozens of other civilizations. The idea that a species that had barely figured out space travel could improve on their work was devastating. High Engineer Kyung-hoon stood before the Vortanian Council, trying to explain how this could have happened. Behind him, holographic displays showed Yuna's ship performance data alongside standard specifications. The numbers were so far outside normal parameters that several council members had accused him of presenting fake information. "The modifications appear to be genuine," Kyung-hoon said, his voice tight with embarrassment. "Our best analysis teams have confirmed the readings multiple times." "How is this possible?" demanded Council Leader Sung-jin. "Our engineering principles have been refined over thousands of years. How can a primitive species improve on perfection?" Meanwhile, at the Galactic Research Institute, Dr. Minji was leading her own investigation into what was being called the Haven Station incident. Unlike the Vortanians, who were focused on damage control, Minji was genuinely curious about how Juan had achieved these results. She had spent weeks analyzing every modification he had made, running computer simulations and testing his jury-rigged solutions. What she found disturbed her more than she wanted to admit. Juan's repairs weren't lucky accidents or random improvements. They showed a completely different way of thinking about engineering problems, where alien engineers would spend months Calculating optimal solutions and running safety tests, Juan had simply looked at what was broken and found the most direct way to fix it. He ignored established procedures, bypassed safety protocols, and used whatever materials he had available. By every rule of proper engineering, his modifications should have caused catastrophic failures. Instead, they worked better than designs that had taken teams of experts decades to perfect. Dr. Minji called an emergency meeting with her research team. The conference room was packed with some of the galaxy's brightest minds, all trying to understand how a human using primitive tools had outperformed their advanced civilization. The human's approach appears to be purely intuitive, Minji explained, showing holographic models of Juan's modifications. He doesn't calculate stress loads or energy efficiency ratings. He simply identifies the problem and creates a solution using whatever resources are available. That's not engineering, protested Dr. Young-ho, one of the Institute's senior researchers. That's just random tinkering. Random tinkering that somehow produces better results than our most sophisticated methods, Minji replied. We need to figure out why. But before they could complete their analysis, more disturbing news started arriving. Other human mechanics at nearby colonies had somehow learned about Juan's techniques. They were duplicating his methods, improving on his designs, and creating ships that were outperforming military vessels. The human colony at New Seoul reported that their cargo haulers were now faster than most courier ships. The mining station at Busan claimed their heavy equipment was operating at efficiency levels that violated physics as the galaxy understood it. And most alarming of all, the human settlement at Incheon had somehow modified their defense ships to the point where they could outfight vessels 10 times their size. The Galactic Council called emergency sessions as representatives from dozens of species gathered to discuss what was rapidly becoming a crisis. The Great Chamber, which usually echoed with formal debate and careful diplomacy, was filled with shouting voices and panicked arguments. Councillor Jinwoo of the Ultec Federation stood at the speaker's podium, his usually calm demeanor replaced by visible agitation. "We have spent millennia perfecting our methods," he declared to the assembled representatives. "Our engineering principles have created the greatest technological civilization in galactic history. Now these humans suggest we've been doing everything wrong?" The chamber erupted in angry voices. Representatives from the Zelthari Confederacy demanded immediate action to prevent human technology from destabilizing their manufacturing economy. The Korean Empire wanted all human mechanics arrested and their techniques classified as military secrets. The hegemony of free worlds suggested that maybe they should be learning from humans instead of trying to stop them. "Order," shouted Council. Speaker Soo-hyun, banging her ceremonial staff against the floor. "We will address this crisis systematically, not through panic and accusations." But panic was exactly what was spreading through the galaxy's established civilizations. If humans could casually improve on technology that had taken millennia to develop, what did that say about the supposed superiority of advanced alien science? If a species that still used combustion engines could solve problems that had stumped the galaxy's greatest minds, maybe those minds weren't as great as everyone had assumed. The economic implications were staggering. Entire industries built around advanced alien technology might become obsolete overnight. Trade agreements based on technological superiority could collapse. The careful balance of power that had maintained galactic peace for centuries was suddenly looking very unstable. Dr. Minji watched the council debates through secure feeds and realized that everyone was missing the real point. This wasn't about humans being better engineers than aliens. It was about humans approaching engineering problems in a completely different way. They didn't see technology as something to be perfected and preserved. They saw it as something to be constantly improved, modified, and adapted. Where alien civilizations had spent centuries creating the perfect solution to engineering problems, humans seemed to assume that every solution could be made better. They combined intuition with experimentation, ignored established limitations, and weren't afraid to try things that might not work. The question that kept everyone awake at night was simple but terrifying. If human engineering intuition could surpass advanced alien science in starship design, What other fundamental assumptions about galactic civilization were wrong? What other areas of technology, science, and society might benefit from the human approach of ignoring the rules and just making things work? The galaxy was about to find out, whether it wanted to or not. The Galactic Council had seen plenty of crises over the centuries, but nothing like this. What started as a simple engineering curiosity had exploded into a political nightmare that was tearing apart the foundations of interstellar civilization. In the Great Assembly Hall on Nexus Prime, representatives from hundreds of worlds were shouting over each other in a dozen different languages. The usual diplomatic courtesy had been abandoned as panic took hold. Some species were demanding immediate access to human engineering techniques, while others wanted humanity locked down before they could cause any more damage to the established order. The Kalari delegation was particularly vocal. Their entire economy was built around manufacturing precision starship components that were now apparently inferior to what humans could cobble together in a garage. Representative Hiejin stood at her podium, her normally blue skin flushed purple, with rage. "These humans are destroying galactic commerce," she declared. "Our manufacturing facilities employ billions of workers. If human modifications make our products obsolete, entire star systems will face economic collapse." On the other side of the chamber, the smaller civilizations were singing a very different tune. For centuries, they had been forced to buy expensive technology from the major powers, always staying one step behind in the arms race. Now suddenly, they had access to engineering techniques that could level the playing field. Ambassador Wonho of the Terran Mining Collective was practically grinning as he spoke. Perhaps it's time the galaxy learned that bigger isn't always better. These human techniques could help smaller civilizations defend themselves instead of relying on the protection of major powers. The economic numbers were terrifying everyone involved. Stock markets across the galaxy had crashed when investors realized that entire industries might become worthless overnight. The Vortanian Shipbuilding Corporation had lost 60% of its value in a single day. The Alltech Technology Consortium was hemorrhaging money as buyers cancelled orders for advanced systems that humans could apparently improve with scrap metal and tape. But the military implications were even more frightening. Reports were coming in from across human space about modified ships that could outfight vessels designed for warfare. The peaceful mining colony at Daegu had somehow turned their cargo haulers into ships that could outrun military interceptors. The research station at Gwangju had modified their shuttle to carry weapon systems that rivaled a battlecruiser. Fleet Admiral Chan Wu of the Galactic Defense Force stood before the Emergency Military Committee, his expression grim. "We're facing a complete breakdown of established military doctrine. These human modifications are appearing faster than we can track them. Minor powers are suddenly fielding ships that can challenge our most advanced vessels." "How is that possible?" demanded General Yu Jung of the Hegemony Forces. "Our military technology has been refined over millennia. How can primitive modifications surpass purpose-built warships?" "Because humans don't follow our rules," Admiral Chan Wu replied. "They don't care about established doctrine or proper procedures. They just make things work." Meanwhile, Ambassador Sujin of the Human Colonial Authority was having the worst month of her diplomatic career. Her office had become a revolving door of alien representatives making increasingly desperate offers. Some wanted to buy human engineering secrets, others wanted to hire human mechanics. A few were making barely disguised threats about what would happen if humanity didn't share their techniques. The Korean Empire had offered humanity entire star systems in exchange for exclusive access to human engineering methods. The Zelthari Confederacy had promised massive trade agreements. The Hegemony of United Worlds had made an offer so large that Sujin had to read it 3 times to make sure she understood the numbers correctly, but they had also received darker messages. The Kelari had suggested that human colonies might face unfortunate accidents if their engineering techniques continued disrupting galactic commerce. The Alltech Federation had quietly mentioned that species who threatened galactic stability sometimes found themselves facing unfortunate military exercises near their borders. "I don't understand what you want from us," Sujin told the latest delegation of desperate alien diplomats. We're not hiding some secret technology. Our mechanics just fix things differently than you do. That's exactly the problem, replied Councillor Jae-hyun of the Vortanian Trade Commission. Your different methods are making our advanced technology look primitive. We need to understand how your people think about engineering problems. What made the situation even more frustrating was that the person at the center of the galactic crisis had no idea what was happening. Hwan was still working. In his garage on Haven Station, completely oblivious to the political chaos his simple repair job had unleashed. When reporters from across known space descended on Haven Station, Hwan treated them like curious tourists. He showed them around his cluttered workshop, explained his modifications in simple terms that most of them didn't understand, and seemed genuinely confused about why everyone was so excited. Broken things should be fixed, he told a news crew from the Galactic Broadcasting Network. Don't see why everyone's so worked up about it. If something's not working right, you figure out what's wrong and you fix it. That's just common sense. But your modifications violate established engineering principles, the reporter pressed. How do you explain the impossible performance improvements? Hwan shrugged and went back to working on a power coupling that was giving him trouble. Maybe your established principles aren't as good as you thought they were. The interview was broadcast across the galaxy and only made things worse. Here was a human mechanic casually suggesting that millennia of advanced engineering might be fundamentally flawed, and he was saying it while fixing a starship engine with what appeared to be a kitchen utensil. The final straw came when the hegemony of United Worlds issued an ultimatum. Humanity would share their engineering secrets with the galactic community or face complete economic sanctions and possible military action. The message was delivered with typical hegemony arrogance, assuming that a primitive species would immediately cave to pressure from their betters. But by the time the ultimatum was delivered, it was already too late. Human mechanics had been spreading across the galaxy for months, taking jobs on alien ships, working in spaceports, and sharing their techniques with anyone who was interested. The revolutionary approach to engineering couldn't be contained because it wasn't really a secret technology. It was just a different way of thinking about problems. The galaxy's carefully maintained balance of power was crumbling, and there was no way to put it back together. The age of rigid technological hierarchies was ending, whether the established powers liked it or not. 2 years had passed since that fateful day when Hwan fixed Yuna's broken ship with duct tape and spare parts. The galaxy that emerged from Aha. The chaos looked nothing like the one that had existed before. What had started as a simple repair job had become the spark that ignited the greatest technological revolution in galactic history. Haven Station, once a forgotten human outpost on the edge of nowhere, had become the most important location in known space. Ships from hundreds of different civilizations crowded the station's expanded docking bays, all hoping to learn from the human mechanics who had turned the galaxy's understanding of engineering upside down. Hwan's little garage had grown into a massive complex that sprawled across 3 levels of the station. But despite all the expansion and new equipment, the heart of it remained the same cluttered workshop where he had first shown the galaxy that sometimes the best solutions come from the most unexpected places. The transformation hadn't been easy. Those first months after the political crisis had been touch and go, with some alien civilizations threatening war rather than accept that their technological superiority had been an illusion. But as more and more species began experimenting with human engineering methods, the results spoke for themselves. Ships that had taken decades to design were being improved in days. Manufacturing processes that had remained unchanged for centuries were suddenly producing better results with simple modifications. Even the most stubborn alien engineers had to admit that human intuition was achieving things their careful calculations had said were impossible. Commander Yuna stood on the bridge of her ship, looking out at the traffic around Haven Station. Her vessel had become something unique in the galaxy, a hybrid of human and alien technology that represented the best of both approaches. Hwan's original modifications were still there, now enhanced and refined by teams of human and alien engineers. Working together, the ship itself had become a symbol of what cooperation could achieve. Alien theoretical knowledge combined with human practical intuition had created technologies that neither species could have developed alone. Her quantum drive now operated at efficiency levels that would have been considered fantasy just 2 years ago, while her navigation systems used alien precision enhanced by human adaptability. "Commander," her communications officer called out, "we're receiving a priority message from the Galactic Engineering Consortium. They're asking if you can attend the opening ceremony for the new Interspecies Engineering Academy." Una smiled. The academy was another sign of how much had changed. Instead of rigid hierarchies, where advanced species looked down on primitive ones, the galaxy now had institutions dedicated to combining different approaches to problem-solving. Human mechanics worked alongside Vortanian theorists, Altec researchers collaborated with human tinkerers, and everyone benefited from the exchange of ideas. The economic transformation had been just as dramatic. The old system where major powers controlled technology and smaller civilizations begged for scraps had collapsed. Now, human-trained mechanics were scattered throughout the galaxy, helping anyone who needed their ships fixed or their systems improved. The knowledge couldn't be hoarded or controlled because it wasn't really knowledge in the traditional sense. It was a way of thinking that could be learned but not owned. The Kelari, who had been so angry about humans disrupting their manufacturing monopoly, had discovered that incorporating human methods into their production lines actually made them more competitive, not less. The Korean Empire had found that human-modified ships performed better in their harsh frontier conditions. Even the proud Vortanians had swallowed their pride and opened exchange programs where their engineers could learn from human mechanics. But perhaps the most significant change was happening at Haven Station itself, where the first interspecies engineering summit was about to begin. Representatives from across the galaxy had gathered to establish new standards for technological development, standards based on cooperation rather than competition. The ceremony was held in what had once been Juan's original garage, now expanded but still recognizable. Delegates from civilizations that were thousands of years older than humanity sat alongside human mechanics who had learned their trade in similar cluttered workshops scattered across human space. When they called Juan to the stage to receive the Galactic Innovation Prize, he looked exactly the same as he had 2 years ago. Same grease-stained coveralls, same messy hair, same friendly grin that suggested he still didn't quite understand what all the fuss was about. "I still don't get why everyone thinks this is such a big deal," he said into the microphone, his galactic standard much improved, but still carrying that distinctive human accent. "Broken things should be fixed. If something's not working right, you figure out what's wrong and you make it better. That's just common sense." The audience, filled with some of the galaxy's most distinguished scientists and engineers, burst into applause. Not the polite, formal applause of diplomatic ceremonies, but genuine appreciation from people who had learned something important from this humble human mechanic. "Sometimes the best way forward is to stop overthinking and just fix what's broken," Juan continued, warming to his theme. "You don't need fancy degrees or expensive equipment. You just need to pay attention to what the problem actually is, not what you think it should be." Dr. Minji, now head of the new Galactic Institute for Collaborative Engineering, stood up from her seat in the audience. "The human approach has taught us something crucial," she said. "We had become so focused on perfection that we forgot about progress. We were so concerned with following established procedures that we stopped asking if those procedures were actually the best way to do things." As the ceremony concluded and delegates began forming the working groups that would shape galactic technology for generations to come, Una reflected on how much had changed. The rigid caste systems that had defined galactic civilization for millennia had crumbled, replaced by networks of cooperation where ideas mattered more than the species that created them. New hybrid technologies were emerging every day from the collaboration between human intuition and alien knowledge. Ships that could repair themselves using human adaptability principles. Manufacturing systems that combined alien precision with human creativity. Even art and culture were being transformed as different species learned from each other's approaches to problem-solving. But perhaps the most important change was philosophical. The galaxy had learned that advancement didn't always come from the most sophisticated source. Sometimes, the most revolutionary solution came from someone willing to get their hands dirty, ignore the established rules, and think about problems in completely new ways. As Juan headed back to his workshop to continue working on whatever broken thing had been brought to him that day, the galaxy continued its transformation. His simple repair job had done more than fix one ship. It had repaired the galaxy's approach to innovation itself, proving that sometimes the best way to move forward was to stop worrying about doing things the right way and start focusing on just getting them done.